Hi, and welcome to the Roar Newsroom podcast. This is a platform to share student stories, student experiences, and talk about things generally at the university. My name is Emma Fallside. I'm one of the news editors here at Roar, and it's my pleasure to be presenting for you today. So, hi, and welcome back to the Newsroom. Today, I am interviewing an old friend of mine, actually. I've known you at King's for a long time now.
A very long time.
Very long time. So for a little bit of background for our listeners, let's start with who you are, what you studied, and when you graduated.
Sure. Hello. I'm Luke. Luke O'Donnell. I've just graduated. Actually, I graduated in January. And I studied history at King's. And I guess immediately after graduation, I got a job in the Houses of Parliament with a senior MP, Mel Stride MP, who's the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
Yeah, so that's sort of what we're here to talk about,
Yeah.
is your parliamentary experience. But before we get into that, can you walk me through a bit of what post-graduation looked like for you? I think we're approaching that time of the year. People are graduating, I'm graduating, and I think a lot of people are quite anticipatory of what comes next.
Sure. I guess sort of what I immediately envisioned when I finished university was I'd be able to get a job immediately. It took me a couple of months. It took me a while. I think my close friend story on Instagram really saw sort of my insanity come out. At my frustration of not being able to get a job, but I managed to get one. I guess post graduation, the reality is very much. It's very much that things aren't as you expect them to be, and sort of the image that you have is often an incorrect one, and it's often one that in actuality is a lot more. It's a lot slower, and it really can for a lot of people it can take a while to find a job that you really want to do, that you're really comfortable in. I guess it can. It can take a bit longer.
Yeah. And obviously it was a process of application for you. I remember, again, when you were going through that. So I did want to break down a bit the process of how you actually became a parliamentary aide and what those steps look like.
Sure. I guess it's different for some people. There are a few routes into it. I guess the traditional route is in your first or second year, you apply for what's called a parliamentary internship, and then sort of during your spring half term break or during your summer break, you'll intern for 6 weeks or maybe longer, maybe a few months with a member of parliament, and then after that you'll become what's called a part-time parliamentary researcher, and then that's sort of during your last year of university, you'll sort of work with your study, and then alongside that you'll work part-time for a member. So that's one route into it. My route was, I guess, a lot different. During my second year of university, I was working part-time at a knife crime charity in Brixton called Chips. Shout out to Chips. And I guess me wanting to work into Parliament, I didn't have that. I didn't have that internship to sort of build a network and open a door into Parliament. So I guess the process took longer. But you can get there. I guess a lot of ways to apply are there's one website in particular called workformp.com, and that's sort of I guess not too many people know about it, but it's where a lot of public affairs or government jobs are advertised, and it's for a lot of MPs it's the only website that they'll advertise vacancies on. So I was on that every day probably. I was on Work for MP every day applying, and I got many rejections, many interviews, but then many rejections until getting a job offer with Mel to be parliamentary aide for him. Yeah.
And what were the sort of qualifications that kind of role was looking for?
Qualification wise, it's very much. I guess it's. There has to be some degree of party alliance. You have to be sympathetic to the views of the party that the MP belongs to. So I guess that is sort of one key one. But
And
then
I guess
also
we should mention also Mel Strider's Tory MP.
Mel Strider is a Conservative MP.
Sitting MP.
Yes, sitting Conservative MP. But that's sort of one, that's one aspect of it. But then also, I guess, being educated, being, I guess, involved and even a little bit obsessed with politics and policy, and then also having a background in things similar to what you'll be doing in Parliament. So briefing writing, briefing research, casework, things like that. So I guess having experience in things that link to Parliament is important, but then also being politically engaged, especially with whichever party you're aligned to. I think that's also quite important.
And what did being politically engaged look like for you in particular?
For me, it was always, I guess, being a bit pedantic about it all. Getting involved with. I did an internship at a think tank called Bright Blue. That's linked to sort of the liberal conservative wing of the Conservative Party. Mm-hmm. So I guess getting involved however you can in whatever you can really, and then also reading the news and being aware. Mentioning in your interview, in your cover letter, current events, what's happening, what you think about it. I think showing your aptitude in current affairs and party affairs, I think is important.
Yeah. And then, obviously, there are a lot of things about being a parliamentary aide that you won't be able to talk about publicly. But I did want to ask if you could walk us through what your day-to-day looked like. Like, what was the actual job about? What did it entail?
Sure. I guess with Parliament, if you think about the structure of it, you're working for one MP, always. You're working for one man, really, and your life, I guess, in a way, revolves around them. And then you're in a team. Often, as it's only one man, it's a very small team with a very rigid hierarchy and a very rigid structure of what you're supposed to be doing, what you need to be doing. And so I think day to day, my day to day would differ from a parliamentary chief of staff, who in their position they'd be going to meetings on their behalf, they'd be engaging with key stakeholders and constituents. Whilst for me, I was I guess on the bottom rung of the ladder, but it's really I guess a mixture of things. So it's running an office in a way, like a lot of jobs are, but then it's also specific things that are very specific to Parliament. It's inquiring about written questions to ministers. It's about completing casework for constituents. It's representing your MP. It's writing briefings for your MP for meetings that they need to go to. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's really one thing about Parliament. One good thing about Parliament is that it's very varied, and no day is the same. But I guess there are drawbacks to that as well. There are drawbacks to working in Parliament for sure.
Yeah. And one thing you mentioned about how you were very much working for sort of one man.
Yeah.
Did you actually feel like you were a part of this bigger system? I think when people look at Parliament, they think of it as quite an institution.
It's very much a bubble. Yeah, there's I think it's I had a few friends from Labour. I had a couple Liberal Democrat friends, but then I guess it's very apart from the MPs, which they all seem to be mates. Regardless of party party. Being young and being a parliamentary aide in Parliament, you sort of tend to socialise and drink heavily with people from your party, with MPs. MP staffers. I guess parliamentary aides are called staffers. That's like the nickname. Drinking with other staffers from the same party. I'd say that if I were to explain Parliament in a nutshell, it's very much like a private all boys school, but of everyone. It's a big building filled with people that all sort of everyone knows everyone. There's rivalries. It's very. I think the link between a school and Parliament, I think, is a good one, in that the social life is so large, but then there is this. There's a large culture of work and of hard work, but then also of factionalism, I'd say.
That's really interesting. And did you feel quite prepared coming into the job? Did you?
Fuck no. I was, I guess, going in, with no real parliamentary experience, with no real, having this idea of what Parliament would be. And then that idea being confirmed in some ways. People really do care about their constituents, and they really do care about helping people and making Britain a better place. But then, in some ways, in some ways it was different to what I thought. There's parts of the life of it, where that sort of image of a Westminster bubble is really, really confirmed. But then also, I was surprised by, I guess, a lot of people's dedication to helping people, to helping their constituents.
I guess also in terms of more practical job skills.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
Did you find that maybe your university degree prepared you quite well, your past experience? Did you feel competent coming in, or did you think there was a lot you had to learn?
I think it differs. I think that there was some parts of my skill set, in research and in briefing and in sort of verbal and written communication that I think I was prepared for and I had experience in. But then there are some things that are very unique to Parliament, especially casework and dealing with constituents. A lot of these people that reach out to their MP are very much, it's their last resort. A lot of them are in very desperate situations. I think working for Mel, especially, who is Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, a lot of people would ring up the Parliamentary Office by accident concerning their benefits or concerning their pension, which are very emotional issues for a lot of people.
Probably, I'm sure, in the present climate.
Yeah, exactly, especially in the present climate in the cost of living crisis. So when they would ring up and I'd have to answer the phone, or I'd have to deal with their emails, and I guess I wasn't prepared to experience so much emotional vulnerability, especially from some very desperate people. But I guess in terms of skill set, I think as long as you focus on research and you focus on written and verbal communication, and then also just getting used to a general office setting, I think that in Parliament you'll be able to thrive.
Would you say Parliament was a general office setting?
No. Well, no. In some ways, it differs. I guess when you're in a very small office setting, you're with the same people every day. You see the member you work for, you see the chief of staff, the caseworkers, the other parliamentary assistant, and you grow very comfortable with them, and you get I think you see them more than you see your parents at some points,
Yeah.
and you see your friends, and so in that way, it is an office setting. You get along. You buy advent calendars at Christmas. It's very very typical in that sense. But then in other ways, it is atypical. Every Wednesday, we all sit around and watch PMQs. Which or after ministerial questions, Mel would come up and would debrief about what was spoken about, stuff like that. So I guess in some ways it's typical office setting, but then in other ways it's very in tune and very interlinked with the political process, I guess, as it would. You're in one of the centres of democracy.
I guess, you have these reminders that this is a place of power.
Yeah.
And then, going on to you leaving Parliament, because one thing that has happened pretty recently is you left your job.
Yeah.
And walk me through that. Was there an event that sort of led to that, or was this a more gradual decision?
It wasn't one event. It wasn't some big dramatic moment where I rage quit and dropped the mic and walked out. Yeah. It was very much a gradual decision. It's to work in Parliament, you have to be a very specific type of person.
And how long did you work there?
I worked there. I got the job at the end of October, so it's almost 6 months, I believe, 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be a very specific type of person. I guess in some ways you have to be thick-skinned. You're dealing again with people who are showing a large degree of emotional vulnerability, people that are angry, people that are that don't understand why you can't help them, because I guess you have to be very very thick-skinned, but then you also have to network. You have to, I guess, be. You have to fit in, I guess, and I think that's quite typical in an office environment, But in Parliament, what fitting can mean, I guess that depends on it depends on a lot of factors, I suppose.
What did that mean to you?
I guess very much drinking heavily, I think, is in some sects of in terms of young people working in Parliament, having a drink after work is very common. So there's a large drinking party culture. There's a large event culture, and often that's for a lot of people that's they want to go home after work. You've been working early, you've been working late, you want to go home, but then there's this expectation. You'll burn the midnight oil, and then you'll go out afterwards. You'll go to a pub, you'll go to a bar in Parliament, something like that.
Yeah.
So there's that culture there, but then there's also, I guess, more with working for an MP that represents a party. There's an expectation that you'll have views that are concurrent with some views, with the views of others, and especially in extreme wings of the party, people that work for specific members who share some of their views, whether they be very socially conservative, whether they be very economically conservative, people that are, I guess, more moderate. There is that awkwardness there of you're a member of the same party, but then their views, their views are largely different to mine, and I think that in a place where perspective matters, and in a place where fitting in matters, that can not for me personally. I've never had any confrontation, but that can lead to confrontation and ostracization in some instances for some people. And I think I left Parliament because it just wasn't the job for me, and it wasn't really the place for me. I think I'd prefer to do something. Firstly, that pays better, but secondly, something that I guess is a lot more calm and a lot less crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a bit on the point that you were making about factions, I guess one thing that you do hear a lot just in political rhetoric in the news is about all these different factions of, especially the Conservative Party, but I think of most parties. And in a very practical sense, I guess people hear that, but they don't really understand what that means in terms of who you're working next to and what it can feel like in such a divided workplace. This is one thing where we say, in some ways, Parliament is like an office, but in a lot of ways, it's not. It's much more than that.
Yeah, it's I think the analogy of a school in that there's cliques. You're all in the same year group in a way. You're all living through the same experiences. When President Zelensky came to speak in Westminster Hall, every person, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of age, was there showing support. But then there is a degree of there are cliques, and there are there is factionalism. But I think in any political centre that's going to be common.
But do you feel like that did impact your working environment, especially?
Especially during Truss, when all that went down. Where that was, I think I was 1 week into the job when Liz dropped out and then Rishi became Prime Minister, and that was really when the factionalism grew. I've spoken to some people, and apparently Brexit, for example, and other major political events, there tends to be a flare up of this sort of factionalist tradition. But in Parliament, I guess it was, I guess, sort of the intensity of the political climate and the intensity of the scandal that was hitting the Conservative Party definitely, I think, contributed to my decision to leave. I'd say, yeah.
And have you regretted leaving since?
No. I have a lot more time on my hands, and I'm looking at I'm interviewing a lot more jobs, and I'm have a lot more time for myself. But I guess there are there are some parts to Parliament that are amazing, but I guess eventually the novelty can wear off, and when you get used to looking up at Big Ben every day, and when you get used to being behind Jacob Rees-Mogg in the coffee queue, that's when I guess the problems of the workplace and the problems of I guess my own unhappiness in the workplace really sort of come to light, and so I guess I don't regret it. I just sort of look back on it fondly, and I can't wait to use the skills that I've learned in another situation.
Do you think you'd ever consider going back to politics?
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe one day. Maybe probably not as a parliamentary aide. Maybe as maybe working alongside Parliament in something that in an NGO or for a corporate firm in something like lobbying. I can see myself in Parliament in that sense, but I don't think anything party political or anything like working for an MP. No.
Yeah. And what, to you at least, again, you talked about sort of taking the skills and lessons forward into whatever you do next, which I personally am very excited to see.
Thank you.
What do you think your biggest takeaways are from your time working there?
I think just the ability to get a lot of work done in a very short amount of time. It's when you're when there's a bill meeting in 10 minutes, and then there's a meeting with a water firm in your MP's constituency an hour after that, and you have to prep the member for questions in the House of Commons, but then you also have to prep them and brief them for meeting with a major water company about pollution, for example. That sort of being able to work to a high quality on a short deadline, I think that's sort of the biggest takeaway from Parliament. And I think that if you're as a training ground for a lot of jobs, I think Parliament is really great for that, in that you really do develop a thicker skin and an ability to communicate and connect with people, but then also the ability to do work well and do it fast. And I think that's those sort of transferable skills are things that are great. That's one great thing about Parliament.
Yeah. And then, sort of as part of our concluding bit, you mentioned that you think it does take a certain type of person to be able to work in Parliament, and I think I personally know quite a few people who might be interested in a political career. A lot of people applying to things like the civil service fast stream, or positions like the one that you held with parliamentary internships. What advice would you give to somebody who's looking to go into something similar to what you did?
I think keep an open mind and really keep an open mind and be curious about the political situation, about what's happening in this country and then in the world in general. But then also really think about your political alignment and really think about where your view, what your views are and where you stand, and also think about I guess what am I going to learn from this experience? Parliament a lot of people joke it's a revolving door. MPs can win a seat in one election, they can lose a seat in the next. Parliamentary aides I guess can a lot of people use it as a ladder to other opportunities. A lot of people use it for a ladder to become an MP one day, I guess for a lot of different things. So I suppose keep an open mind, keep being politically engaged. Also work hard and I guess yeah.
Well, thank you very much for speaking to me. If there's anything else you'd like to say, I'll give you a bit of an open floor.
Anyone else got something they want me to shout out? No, I think I'm good. No,
Amazing.
Yeah, all good.
Thank you for listening to the Newsroom podcast. A big thank you for our media team with help with this production. If you or somebody that you know has a story or experience that you would like to share with Roar, please reach out to us on Instagram or via our email, both of which will be linked in the description.